without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in Steve Grumbine here. He's been on the show before. It's been quite a bit, but Steve can tell us so much here about the deficit, the budget, spending through MMT. Welcome back, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been a while. You're right. It's too long.
Well, we have so much to talk about. When it comes to MMT, first and foremost, again, for some people who are maybe a newer viewer, they may not be aware of what MMT is. So if you can explain to people what modern monetary theory means, and then we can dive into this whole myth about the debt ceiling.
Right. So most of the economics that we've all been taught, and I mean, all of us have been taught, there's nobody that missed it, has been completely wrong. It was like based on the gold standard. It was based on governments borrowing from private banks to survive, and governments going broke, and taxes. We pay taxes to fund all these things. And you got these pitched battles between right-wing, folks, working class people, and left-wing working class people fighting about spending priorities. And I don't want my hard-earned tax dollars going to this, and I don't want my hard-earned tax dollars going to that. And really what we found over the years, especially beginning like in 1971, when Richard Nixon took us out of the Bretton Woods Accord, which was kind of like a worldwide gold standard, we found out that we were in something. We were always in this, but we didn't really know. I think maybe some people knew, but we all started to find out in 71 that they took us off the gold standard. And we have what they call a sovereign, meaning we own it. Free floating means it's not pegged to any commodity. Fiat, meaning by decree. In other words, we spend it into existence. Our Congress, through Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, has the power of the purse. And when it says spend, we create money and we spend it into existence. Your tax dollars don't have anything to do with that. And what we found is that taxes literally delete money. That's what they do, because they always spend new money. And if we didn't tax, there'd just be mounds and mounds and mounds and mounds of money in the world. And so there's a way of getting rid of money, and that's through taxation. Taxes actually delete money from the system. So what MMT does is it describes how the system that we have today, not some future system, not some system we could implement, but the proper way that the actual system works. So when you think of things like the deficit, big deal. When you think about things like the national debt to whom? We create the money. Who is this debt to? Tell me this miracle debt that we're talking about. And so we found that almost everything that we fight about amongst each other, the working class, is screwed up because we've got well-meaning lefties going, I don't want my taxes going to Israel. And we got other people on the other side going, well, I don't want my taxes going to your gay wedding or your abortion or whatever it is that they fancy in their brain is happening. So what MMT does is it describes all of that, and it explains it in great detail. And once you understand it, pretty much all the news starts becoming very perturbing. All the economic conversations start really grating on your nerves because they make a lot of lies up that we literally fight about nonstop. And MMT debunks all of them. Really, it's great.
So let's get into the taxes, okay?
Sure.
Because, and I've done this before too. A lot of times we have a tendency, we say that I don't want my hard-earned tax dollars paying towards such and such. So
Right.
let's take Gaza, for example. Right now, there is an organization called Taxpayers Against Genocide, and they have a suit. They are suing Congress because they're basically saying that they did not agree to have their tax dollars go to fund the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah.
Where would you say, is that tax dollars or is that federal dollars?
No, it's not tax dollars in any way, shape, or form. I get into arguments with allies always, not because I want to fight with them, but because I'm trying to explain something that they clearly don't know. And how could you know if this isn't something you studied or you researched or whatever? You're just going off of what they've always told you, right? And what they've always told you has been a lie. And so when you think about taxes, the reason for the tax is it creates the monopoly of the US dollar for the government. This is why Bitcoin will never displace the dollar, because the power of the gun, the power of the IRS, the power of the state backs the tax. So if you don't pay your tax, they're not coming for your Bitcoin, they're coming for your US dollars. And so when you look over there at like Elon Musk, for example, getting his billions and billions and billions of US dollars and subsidies for SpaceX and for Tesla and for all these other things he does, that's, again, the purpose of the tax is to make that money matter. That money matters because you have to spend it to pay your taxes. And that is the loop that they have us in. That's the loop not just that the US has, China has, Australia has, the UK has, all these folks have. So what happens, and this is why it's so nefarious, they spend whatever they want on whatever they want, whenever they want. But the minute that you or I say, help me, I need my teeth fixed, or help me, I need to have a home, or help me, I need clothing, I need food, whatever, they go, well, I don't know where we're going to find the money for that. We're dead broke, man. What can I say? The country is spending irresponsibly. It's out of control, right? But in reality, all your taxes do, and there's a real technical way of explaining this, and I don't think the average person needs the super technical way of explaining this. But what happens is that spending and taxing are completely separate from one another. The government spends Article 1, Section 8 money into existence. It passes a law. That law then goes through the president. The president signs it into law. That law then goes over to the Federal Reserve, the nation's bank, and it then keystrokes the deposits, just numbers like on a calculator or whatever, right into the ledger for the Treasury. The Treasury then spends it to whoever the bill said we're spending this money on. Now, we have other things that get a lot of money spent on. The reason why I'm bringing this up, because I know we want to talk a little bit about the debt ceiling. And so whenever we have unemployment or we have problems with agriculture and food stamps and things like that, there's these things called automatic stabilizers that have long since been passed forever ago. And these stabilizers kick in periodically when certain conditions hit. We have unemployment. Well, we have unemployment money going into the economy now. New money, every time new money. So when I hear somebody say my hard-earned tax, they could not tax us enough to cover all the spending that goes on, right? There's just no way. And so when you think about the zero sum of it all, if taxes pull money out of the economy and delete them, if we keep raising taxes to pay for things, that's more money that's being deleted. That's more money that's being destroyed. And what happens when you destroy money and take it out of people's hands when they need it right here, right now? You create austerity. And when you're poor, austerity hurts a hell of a lot more than when you're rich, when it's just like a drop in the bucket. So taxation isn't about funding things, but it is about priorities. Do we want to have a more equal society? Do we want to tax the wealthy for things that they do that we don't like? Do we want to make a limit on how much they can earn so that they can't buy our democracy? We don't have a democracy. Let's be fair. There is zero democracy in this country. So, but the point is that when you think about what taxes do, taxes take money out of the economy. Taxes create the necessary obligation through fines, fees, penalties, and taxes that keep the monopoly power of the US dollar alive and well. And you want to extrapolate this out to the rest of the world, you've got another kind of obligation. You want to buy oil and stuff like that. You have dollar reserves that people use that keeps the rest of the world tethered. But they also did something else slick, and they did this to the global south mostly. And you could even look at Ukraine and Russia and others. They have the IMF, which is an arm of US imperialism that issues loans in US dollars. And it creates these conditions that create almost like debt peonage slavery around the world. And they are doing everything they can to pay a foreign debt in US dollars. So how do they get US dollars? Well, they certainly don't print US dollars. They don't create US dollars. So they've got to sell their goods and services to us to get US dollars. And that's how we maintain empire. And if they don't agree to the things that we put out there, we just send the military, or we send a CIA coup in there, or SEAL team to knock out a leader and put up a prop dummy in there to do it. So that's the name of the game. The taxes don't fund a damn thing, but they do create the obligation that maintains the strength and power of the US dollar.
So I guess the question that I have is that So are our tax dollars paying for the genocide? If
They're
not,
not paying
who's
for anything. It's all
the,
brand new money. And so let me tell you how this works.
oh,
The US government says, hey, we need a jobs program. Let's go ahead and send money to Halliburton, Boeing, and all these other military contractors. And they, in turn, will then send goods and services to Israel. Like we're going to send bombs. We're going to send Bill Gates's version of AI that helped them target the kids in houses and daddy's home kind of shit with the Palantir and all the rest of the stuff. This is how they do it. They spend that money into existence to the military contractors who then in turn, because the law states they were going to send $500 billion or $500 million of tanks to Tunisia or to so-and-so or to whatever. That is what they send. They don't need our US dollars. They need the goods and services. They need the bombs. They need the technology. So our government buys those things. Taxes had nothing to do with it. The one thing that taxes did have something to do with it is to enable the dollar to be strong and powerful because we need it or they're going to take our house from us. They're going to take or they're going to garnish our wages. They're going to do whatever. So the tax is a very powerful form of coercion that keeps us needing to get US dollars. And again, it has not, their dollars are deleted. They literally, when they come into the government receives a tax dollar, they don't respend them. A dollar is only spent one time by the government once, and that's when it's spent into existence. When it comes back to the government, it's destroyed. Doesn't have a life of its own. It literally is gone. So never, your taxes don't fund Social Security. They don't fund student loan repayments. They don't fund abortions. They don't fund Israel. Anything. They don't fund anything. It is all brand new money. The government creates money every time it spends, and it deletes money every time it taxes. That's the game. That's how it works. And I think that's startling realities because we only have to tax enough money to keep us needing the dollar. So we could spend more and more and more and more and more. The deficit could grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, and it wouldn't have a damn bit of difference. The difference would be where we spend that money. Are we spending it on the poor? Are we housing people? Are we giving them health care? Are we taking away student debt that's destroying families and older generation that went back to school during the great financial crisis to reinvent their careers, and all of a sudden they're stuck with $100,000 worth of mounting debt? No, they don't do that. Why? Because if we're in debt, we're slaves of a different color. Now we have to do something, and that's the name of the game because they serve capital. That's the whole shooting match right there.
so I guess everyone should stop saying that then. That their
You're
tax
damn
dollars
right.
are
Yes.
yeah,
Oh my
okay.
God.
That's why. Yeah, because okay. So everyone heard that. We have to stop saying that your tax dollars are funding these things because they're not.
Yes.
Now,
And let me tell you one beautiful thing real quick. And I'll let you get going. I saw Bree and Jen Perlman talking about this. And I swear my heart about jumped out of my chest when Bree said it on camera. I mean, my God, a woman with a big, huge platform, as eloquent as she is saying it, and Jen saying it too. Two people that I have a great deal of respect for, speaking truth to power and saying these things. Because why? Sabby, if I'm talking to a Republican, or I'm talking to a MAGA, or I'm talking to a libertarian, and if we can all say, listen, you may not like the government having this power. You may not like the way this works, but this is how it works. If we can agree that that's true, and it is, by the way, but if we can agree to that, think of all the lies that we fight about all day long, that suddenly we could unite as a working class and do some real damage because we don't want this done in our name. It's not our tax dollars. Nobody's stealing from you to give to them. It's all new money. Think of the game change for bringing us all together. Just that one simple truth. Amazing.
I just for me it's like wow. Because it's just like most of us, we all say it because we all believe it. And then another thing too, if you think about like the budget. So let's get to this whole budget thing, right?
Sure.
One of the phrases I despise the most is when we start talking about these policies that we want. We start talking about universal health care, et cetera. How are you going to pay for it? Like, I hate when people like ask that question because no one asked that question about defense. No one asked how are you going to pay to fund all these wars? Like no one asked that question, right? They don't mention the bloated defense budget, which is over $860 billion, has continued to increase over the years, but never this high. Like they don't ask that question. But again, to me, it's just like I always tell people, like the money is already there. And tell me if I'm wrong on this, because I always say we should reduce the defense budget and then we can pay for some of these things. What do you think about that? Or do you think we can already pay for it now?
We could pay for it either way, right? That's the thing. That's the point. There's no financial constraint. There may be a real resource constraint though. Like, do we have enough labor to absorb that spend? Do we have everybody over here doing, denial of service in the insurance industry when we need people actually creating, high-end, Silicon Valley style, widgets or whatever? I don't know, right? It just depends. So the reality is, at the end of the day, it won't change the ability to spend. You're not saving money. We don't need to ever save money. We create money. There's no such thing. The government never has it. It spends it into existence, right? It's not like it's sitting in a treasure chest waiting to be spent. It's always brand new. It comes to life when they write a law, when it just spends it into existence, literally spends it into existence. So when you think about this, and this is probably the hardest thing for people to get in, and this may be the thing that I'm still dealing with 2 black eyes and a broken nose and a wounded soul over. And that is when I explained that only the federal government has that power, that the state governments don't have that power. The state governments are very similar to you and I and businesses, and they don't have the power to create money. So states are fighting with each other constantly for tax revenue. So like what Texas does to bring jobs to Texas, because they don't have a state income tax, they lure businesses down there and they hire up all the people, but the places that raise taxes lose those businesses, because this is the way it works when it's tax and spend, when it's all about your tax dollars. That's what happens at state and municipal level. So when you think about the federal government having unique powers, and think about this in Europe, it's a very different situation. They're almost exactly like we are in the United States. Each of these countries gave up their power. The Greeks gave up the drachma. The French gave up the franc. The Germans gave up their currency. All of them gave up their currency to adopt the euro. So now they have a non-elected, non-national central bank, the European Central Bank, the ECB, that acts on their behalf. So this is why the UK, you can get mad at them for choosing to leave instead of remain or whatever in that whole thing. I don't know if you remember all that, but the reason they didn't want to give up their monetary sovereignty. They didn't want to give up the British pound. They didn't want to give up their ability to take care of things, but they also didn't want to give up their cultural values or whatever to what they saw. It was a very, very big fight, but it really comes down to the monetary system, right? And so in the United States, when you're talking about debt deficits and all that stuff, the federal government alone has the power to create currency. It doesn't borrow its own currency. Think about how ridiculous that is. Borrowing US dollars from China, borrowing US dollars from England, borrowing who in the world, when you say it out loud, you realize how stupid it is. But you believe it until you actually look in the mirror and say the words, "We're borrowing US dollars from China." What in the world did I just say? So just keep that in mind, that the US government doesn't have any debt. It chooses to sell bonds. It chooses to sell treasury bonds. It doesn't need to. And all treasury bonds are like a form of dollars. I took my money, I bought a treasury bond. Now I have a savings account. That's all it is. It's just basically a savings account that earns its interest. Not a big deal, right? We're not borrowing that money from our grandchildren for future generations are going to be burdened by this. None of that's real. That's all fake. But they're counting on people. And mind you, when I say counting on people's ignorance, I'm not just talking about people, you're not educated. I went and got an MBA. My entire Master of Business Administration taught me everything wrong. Literally, I spent a huge fortune of debt, like real debt that I'm still drowning in, to learn the wrong things. And when I unlearned them, it made me a major advocate to tell everybody. I want everybody to know this. My God, how can you not? You need to know. Oh my God. So, I think it's important that everybody gets to know this, because once we do know this, we're not going to fight about a lot. We're going to start pulling together and uniting in defense of ourselves, in defense of the working class. And I think that's a real game changer.
Well, that brings me to this point, because this question here, I don't know if everyone has seen this, but this is news on the GOP side. Senator Josh Hawley introduces a bill to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. So it says it's unusual move for a Republican, et cetera, et cetera. So I have to say this, Steve, like, once again, like, we know the Democrats tried to do this in a weird way, in a way that we said would probably not work, and it did not work. I want to remind everybody here that it wasn't just Republicans that voted against that $15 minimum wage. There were 7 Democrat senators that voted against it, and 1 independent. That also prevent that from happening. But now all of a sudden, now this bill is coming from a Republican, and I would assume that his colleagues in the Republican Party are going to support it. I would assume that, just based on like partisan politics, right? Now, then how do they respond to the optics here? Because Josh Hawley and many others have complained before, we don't have the money, like, we can't do that. Now he's introducing this bill. Like, I don't. And again, even when it comes to the federal, like a federal $15 minimum wage, which it should be higher than that at this point, especially if we adjust for inflation. How do you explain this? Like with MMT, like when they complain and say that we can't do that, we can't pay everybody, or can't make the minimum wage $15 an hour. Apparently, Josh Hawley is showing that you can.
Yeah, we could easily do that. The issue is not whether the federal government has nothing to do other than making a law that makes the new minimum wage that amount, right? There's not a lot of federal jobs that are minimum wage federal jobs. I'm sure there's some, but there's not a lot. That's not the predominant job. This is really for private businesses. At the end of the day, they have to carve out the way that they do business, and they have to start paying their workers more. The problem is, and this is a problem, is that because the government is cutting spending right now, is literally going berserk, slashing and burning different programs. I mean, my son is autistic, and the federal grants and stuff and federal monies that go to fund the states that support things like that have been radically, hurt big time. So there's a lot of, every spending cut is less money in the economy. Don't even worry about what it was spent on at first. Just consider money in from the government is what allows us to play Monopoly in the real world, right? All of us have, if they cut back on that money, then we have far less money. And then the haves start hoarding and they start cutting labor. So the interesting thing here will be, okay, you make this thing. Are they going to, because you're not spending more into the economy, are they going to then in turn start laying people off? Because after all, we have to lay people off because we can't afford this onerous $15 an hour, right? So it's not an MMT story in the sense that the government is paying people $15 an hour. They're putting a rule that's cascaded on to private enterprise to in turn say the minimum wage you have to pay is 15. I don't know if that makes any sense, but really, if you want to think about the MMT angle though, if you've choked off the fountainhead from which money comes from, which is the federal government, if you reduce spending and if you slash the military budget without spending something elsewhere, you're creating austerity. You're shrinking the money supply, shrinking the amount of money in the active economy. Okay. It may feel good. It may sound good. It's logical, right? Cut this and blah, blah, blah. But that's not how it works. It's all new money. So by cutting it without having a spending bill in hand to spend more somewhere else, you're creating austerity, which is going to create recessions. And then you may have $15 an hour for the lucky people that keep their jobs. But the rest of the people, that's when you start seeing mass layoffs. So it's important to understand there's 2 factors or 3 factors really involved in that. And I'm curious as to, if they stop spending, businesses are going to respond in kind. If they put an additional cost, which is even a few dollars an hour more for labor, they're going to lay other people off. They're going to be less interested in hiring people because they always have a profit motive. They have a profit target. They have their desires to save too. So it's not good. It's capitalism. And I would end it immediately yesterday if I could. But that right there is what you've got. It's not really an MMT story, but with them cutting spending on one hand and then raising wages on the other, you're now fighting over a pool of money, and the capitalists still don't have. There's no structural changes there that are making them retain employees. There's no structural changes there that actually bring about security for the workers, so they could just lay off as many people as they want, and they will. That's my big fear.
And so, two more things for you, Steve. One,
Sure.
what do you think about ending the Federal Reserve?
It doesn't make a bit of difference to me. I mean, look, this is going to sound weird because we haven't talked in a while, but I just want to say that some of my political analysis has radically changed since we last talked. Okay. First of all, there was a study in 2014 Princeton put out that showed we have no democracy at all, that public opinion has zero impact on policy whatsoever. I think it was Gillens and I can't remember the other name.
Martin Gillens.
Yes. And bottom line is that I don't ever forget that. That never washes out of my brain. That is 100% locked in now. I don't deviate. So I don't believe we have a democracy to begin with. But let's say hypothetically, Sabby, you and I were running the government. We're socialists and we're doing socialist things, and we want to make the world better. And so therefore, we empower workers to own their means of production. We empower workers to make decisions, real, true democratic decisions about what we as a country spend on and stuff. That'll be radically different. The Federal Reserve, it merely is the bank. It doesn't have the ability to create new money unless it is by law, right? So the Federal Reserve creates money according to law, and whatever profits it makes by investing and so forth, it's forced to return those profits back to the Treasury. It's stupid because it just ends up being part of this weird circuit internal to the government circuit, and it gets wonky. And the Fed, bring it into the Treasury. Let everybody start saying, oh no, the Treasury is owned by the Rothschilds. Now the Treasury is owned by the Rothschilds, whatever. It's the same thing. It doesn't make a bit of difference. At the end of the day, it's all undemocratic. There is no democracy. See, I used to think that there was, and I think that egg on my face, as I've really learned, there's always going to be enough votes, quote unquote votes, for this bourgeois democracy that supports capital and capital alone, going back to the founding documents, mind you, landowners, wealthy landowners, not the people out of doors, right? So if you think about that and you maintain that knowledge and you always keep that front and center, does it really matter if the Fed is private or public? Because at the end of the day, it still serves the same master that these folks do. So you think about someone like Thomas Sankara, who had all this IMF debt. And he said, you know what? I can either pay you and it won't make a bit of difference, or I can take care of my people. And, he got killed for that, right? And if you think about in the US, that's the same thing that happens with our government. We send the CIA down to coup somebody. We send our SEAL team in to destroy somebody. We send a drone out there to blow someone up. We send our tankers in. We send our bombs in. So at the end of the day, whether it's in the Treasury or whether it's in the Fed, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I wouldn't care one way or the other, I guess is the point.
Last one for you, Steve. What do you think about my producer Eric? He started 11 demands, and he, says that real change start with demands. What do you think about 11 demands? Healthcare for all, a minimum standard of living for everyone in the wars. We have a saying on the show, MCDS, money, corruption, demand, solution, follow the money always, call out corruption, have robust demands, good demands lead to good solutions. And, Eric's idea is that if we could start a movement or something around 11 demands. I think one of the things that we kind of noticed is like some of the things that we've been involved in the past. I know some of the activist things I've been involved in. It almost seems like the demands were lost. Or like if we go back to the George Floyd protests, the demand was defund the police, but then it kind of got away from that because it was co-opted, et cetera. What do you think about that? Do you think we just need a core set of demands and build a movement around that instead of trying to build a movement electorally?
Yeah, I don't believe in electoral politics at all. So I believe that this is closer to the right thing than anything that has to do with voting for people and championing different politicians. Um, I really think that we'll probably find ourselves, the more people that wake up to the lack of democracy that we have, I think that the working class as a whole needs to shed some of those myths, because until we shed the myths of what we think we can do with the government, what we think we can elect these people to do and all, they're going to continue doing it because that's scary to think otherwise, right? You guys, I want to say this. You guys do a lot of really good things that I think are model for what we need to do on a broader scale. Like people say, we need to have a general strike. Well, that's great, but you got to earn a general strike. You think about how hard it is to do the mutual aid you guys already do. What you do, imagine doing that throughout the nation, and not just a little bit, but having legal aid for people to really, really honestly become ungovernable, having healthcare available. When I was a strike captain in the phone company, right, I had to work at Domino's Pizza at night to survive, and I got like a pittance of money from the strike fund. They did not prepare us for a strike. And so what you had was, within a week, you had people that were literally trying to take care of their families crossing the picket line. And you can blame them. You call them scabs. You can call them whatever you want. But at the end of the day, it takes preparation, right? So we're in a phase right now, in my opinion, where we not only need to build parallel systems, but we need to build dual power. And I think your guys' former name, Fred Hampton, I think that we need to take a page out of Fred Hampton's book and really, really, really think about what that looks like, and live parallel from this fake system. This system is, you see that picture of Cuba that they think they're getting you on the capitalist show. Oh, over here's this and over here's the poor. Well, that's what it really is like in America. It has gotten to the point now where these people don't have any idea. And you remember those people laughing as they came out of the DNC when they were talking to them about freaking Gaza, those parasites, these rich elite snobs, these fools, right? But that's their world. And until we realize we're not a part of their world, until we realize that we, the working class, don't have champions over there. And if somebody acts really nice to us kind of for a minute, or one of these guys expresses something that makes us say, well, they're better than the other ones. No, they're not. You're always going to have a parliamentarian there to trip up things. You're going to always have a rotating villain. You're going to always have just enough people to fail, right? And when they do something in your name, it's going to be wrong. Think about what the ACA is. It's a bullshit handout to the insurance companies. It's not healthcare for us. Right. In fact, I think my healthcare has gotten worse since the ACA. Okay. So when you think about what your demands are, I think that is really good. But I think that part of this, and this is really scary, I think, for people, is that we've got to really understand movements. We got to really understand the history of labor. We got to really understand the history of struggle, civil rights struggle, all these struggles, and we got to blend them together, because the struggle of one, an injury to one is an injury to all. That's great union rhetoric. It needs to be great working class rhetoric outside of the union halls, because things are different, right? I mean, I love studying, Russia, and I like looking at the Russian Revolution, but that's not real. I'm not LARPing. I'm not going to sit there and pretend like I'm some, I'm going to use some old English language just so I can prove my socialist chops. It's today. We got to look forward, right? And the material conditions of today are radically different than they were back then. But there's still a lot of good information that we can glean from each of these movements, and we can see how they move the goalposts every time. Yes, we freed the slaves, but now we've made vagrancy laws. Yes, we've done this, but now we've done that. Each of these things. Yes, we've eliminated the ability for slave labor, but when we put you in jail, now we can conscribe you to go ahead and do more labor, right? All these things, we just have to be aware that we are not the target audience for this government. We are slaves of a different breed. We are a different form of slave now. And sometimes we win big and we somehow or another manage to break through with the Bitcoin investment, or we make it through with some other investment. But the reality is we are always othered. We're always not part of that. We're always chasing master's money. In reality, we need to be aware of this and work together. So the 11 demands, I mean, it's as good a start as any. If you can get people rallying around something, anything, as long as it's not fake like our tax dollars, right? As long as we can get radical and really make people pull away from the electoral system and start saying, no. I'm going to stop pouring my money into AOC and Bernie. I'm going to stop pouring my energy into Nina Turner, God love her, whatever. But we're not going to keep going back to Chantel just because that's who the party decided. We're not going to go to Hillary because that's it. We're not going to go to Buttigieg. We're going to go ahead and we're going to say, we don't have a dog in this fight. We are the working class, and we are not represented by this. And even if we vote for it, they're not going to give us anything ever, right? So the best thing we can do is put pressure on the system, because what does capital want? Capital wants to keep making more capital. It wants to keep accumulating capital. So we need to make it so that that's difficult. And we need to start getting strategic in what that looks like. But before we do that, we got to have numbers, because think about it. You run into a friggin' machine gun. It may sound good on some notebook somewhere, but in reality, you're dead, right? So we got to be smart, and we got to think about what it takes to pull people together. And I think radicalizing people through MMT, which I talked about, is a great starting point. If you can explain to them that they could literally make you whole, they could wipe out your student debt without a thought. They could literally provide homes for all. But instead, YIMBYs want to go ahead and give handouts to developers and rezone places and get rid of regulations and all this other stuff to produce houses. But in reality, the government, if it wanted that, if it ever wanted that, could literally speak it into existence and make it so. And then what it would do is it would pay those developers to make whatever it is the government said. And if you and I were making those decisions, it would look very, very different, right? Everything would look different. Forget Medicare for all. Let's have a national health service where you don't even pay a payment. You don't do anything. I mean, I talk to Carl Jha all the time, and Carl's like, man, you go to China, you get whatever you want, man. It's like dirt cheap. They don't even, it's not even about, money. It's really about serving the people. We don't have that here. And we need to really grapple with that. And so, 11 demands is better than no demands. And, if it gets people organized and it gets people committed to staying on task, I think that's as good as anything, right?
That's right. All right, Steve Grumbine, thank you so much. Where can people follow you?
Yeah, so I've kind of gotten off the video path for a little while. That'll be coming back soon. But for all intents and purposes, you can catch my podcast, Macro and Cheese. It comes out every Saturday morning on podcasts. It's audio. We don't really do the video thing that much. And then Tuesday nights, we have something called Macro and Chill, where we have a webinar where we teach people this stuff. We allow them to ask questions. We answer them. We provide answers. And it's really, really nice. I hope more will join us, because we're looking to educate. We just want people to learn this stuff so that they can become a rogue strain of truth within their friends and family and different work groups that they're in. And that's really it. You can go to our website, realprogressives.org, and you can also go to our Substack, which is Substack Real Progressives. So anyway, that's it. Thank you so much, Sabby. I hope I can have you on sometime. I really, really hope that we can talk more, because I think what you guys are doing is probably the closest thing to what we need to be doing, sans the electoral side. So I really respect what you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.